Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it like it was nothing. Like we were talking about taking a weekend off, not tearing apart 5 years of a life we'd built. It's just a break, she told me, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, voice calm, too calm. I looked at her for a long second before answering. Don't worry, I said quietly. I won't be here to react at all. Her eyes flickered. That was the first time I saw her lose her balance. She didn't expect me to stay silent. She expected a fight, a plea, some kind of emotional performance that would feed her guilt just enough to make her feel powerful. But I didn't give her that. I just walked past her, picked up my keys, and left. Outside, the air was cold, sharp. The streetlights stretched long shadows over the driveway where my Ford F-150 sat waiting. I started the engine, but I didn't drive. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, listening to the quiet hum of the motor. She thought she was pressing pause. What she didn't realize was that she'd just hit stop. By the time I came back inside, the house felt foreign. She was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, pretending she wasn't shaken. I went straight to the bedroom, pulled a duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. Not everything, just enough. She looked up when she heard the zipper. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her tone mixed with disbelief and pride. I didn't answer. When I walked out, she said, "You'll regret walking away like this." I turned back just once and told her, "You'll regret thinking I'd stay." Then I closed the door behind me. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. The night blurred by in streaks of neon and silence. I stopped at a gas station around midnight, grabbed coffee from the machine, and sat under the harsh fluorescent lights, staring at nothing. The idea of just a break replayed in my head, over and over, until it stopped meaning anything. It hit me then, she didn't want space. She wanted to test the leash, to see if I'd still orbit around her when she pulled away. But what she didn't know was that the moment she said break, something in me broke too, and I wasn't interested in fixing it. That night, I checked into a cheap roadside motel. No calls, no texts. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow and quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was done, and she'd feel that silence long after I was gone. The morning after, the sun came through the motel blinds like it was trying to remind me the world hadn't stopped just because I had. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the half-empty cup of gas station coffee from the night before. My phone was face down on the nightstand, vibrating every few minutes. I didn't need to look. I already knew who it was. She'd started texting at 2 a.m. Messages stacking one after another like she was talking to herself. "Where are you? You can't just disappear. We need to talk." Then, the one that made me pause. "You're overreacting." I almost laughed at that. Overreacting. That was her favorite word. The perfect way to make my silence look like immaturity instead of restraint. I didn't respond. I just got up, showered, and left the motel before checkout. I stopped at a Starbucks near the interstate, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window. The place was full of people scrolling their phones, avoiding eye contact, pretending to have it together. I watched them and realized I used to be one of them, living quietly miserable, thinking routine was love. By noon, she called. I let it ring. Then again. On the third call, I answered. Her voice cracked just enough to sound sincere. She said she didn't mean it, that it really was just a break, that she needed to figure things out. I stayed quiet. When I didn't answer, she snapped. "You're just gonna walk away? After everything?" I said, calm, almost gentle, "You told me to." And then I hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Because silence, when it's real, doesn't echo, it ends things. That evening, I drove to a small town about an hour away, checked into a cleaner motel, grabbed a sandwich from Subway, and sat in the parking lot eating with the radio off. Somewhere between the bites, it hit me. I wasn't running from her. I was running toward myself, toward the version of me that existed before she made me question my worth. That night, I turned off my phone for good. No more texts. No more calls. No more negotiations. She wanted a break, and now she had one. A permanent one. And while she sat at home convincing herself she'd get to decide when it ended, I already knew. It ended the moment she mistook my silence for weakness. By the third day, something in me shifted. The noise in my head went quiet. No more replaying what she said. No more wondering what she meant by just a break. The truth was simple. She wanted distance, but she wanted to stay in control of the return. She didn't ask for a break because she needed space. She asked because she wanted to know if I'd still be waiting when she came back. That's how people like her test loyalty. They take it for granted until it's gone. I spent that day driving along the coast. No destination, just motion. The kind of drive where you start to remember who you were before someone else's moods started defining your peace. The sky was gray, the kind of dull that feels honest. I pulled into a diner off Highway 17, ordered eggs and black coffee, and sat alone by the window. Across from me, an older couple sat in silence, eating without speaking. But it wasn't tense, it was comfortable. That kind of silence used to exist between us two, before it turned into distance. Later that afternoon, I checked into a small Airbnb on the edge of town. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but I liked it. I opened the windows, let the air in, and made a deal with myself. I wouldn't call, wouldn't check social media, wouldn't even scroll through old photos. If she wanted the space, she could live in it. Alone. That night, I sat on the porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees. My phone was still off, but I knew what was happening on the other side. I could picture her pacing the house, checking her phone every few minutes, pretending she didn't care while refreshing the same screen over and over. That's the thing about control. When it slips, it leaves panic behind. I didn't hate her. I didn't even miss her. What I felt was something colder, indifference. The kind that comes when you've finally stopped giving energy to something that's been draining you for years. By midnight, I fell asleep easily, no racing thoughts, no what-ifs. Just quiet. And somewhere between that calm and the darkness, I realized she'd never expected me to actually leave. She thought she was writing a pause in our story. But what she didn't know was that I'd already closed the book. A week passed before I turned my phone back on. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to move some money. The second the screen lit up, it was chaos. 47 unread messages. Missed calls. Voicemails. Her name everywhere. I didn't open them. I just scrolled, scanning fragments of desperation bleeding through each preview. We need to talk. Please don't make this permanent. You're being childish. Then later, I'm sorry. The shift from arrogance to panic was predictable, almost mechanical. It didn't hurt. It confirmed everything I already knew. I closed the messages and went straight to my bank app. That's when I noticed something strange. Charges from restaurants I'd never been to, places in our city I hadn't visited in months. I opened one statement and saw the names. 2 dinners at Olive Garden, 2 different dates. One just days before she asked for a break. I didn't feel anger. Just the steady, hollow realization that she hadn't been honest for a long time. I remembered that night she came home late, hair damp from the rain, claiming she'd been at a friend's. I'd believed her then because trust was something I gave freely. That was my mistake. People like her confuse kindness for blindness. I didn't confront her. I didn't send screenshots or demand explanations. I deleted the messages, transferred my savings into a new account, and shut the phone off again. I wasn't going to give her the performance she wanted, the explosion, the drama, the tears. I'd learned that silence cuts deeper than shouting ever could. That evening, I drove down to the pier. The ocean was still, black, endless. I sat there for hours, watching the water swallow the last of the daylight. My reflection looked like someone I hadn't met before, someone calm, detached, awake. Later that night, I grabbed dinner from a Chick-fil-A drive-thru and ate in the car, the same car she used to complain about because it smelled like solitude. I smiled at that memory. Solitude didn't smell like anything. It just felt clean. Before going back to the Airbnb, I looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, she was probably scrolling through old photos, trying to remember the version of me she used to control. But what she didn't understand yet was that once a man finds peace in silence, there's no photo that can bring him back. By the second week, I'd gotten used to the quiet. There's something peaceful about disappearing without permission, especially from someone who used to measure your worth by your availability. I'd wake up early, brew coffee, and sit on the porch watching the fog lift off the trees. I didn't think about her much anymore, but when I did, it wasn't about missing her. It was about how much energy I'd wasted trying to be understood by someone who listened only when it benefited her. Then one morning, I checked my email. She'd written, The subject line was simple: please read. The message started with small talk, the kind people use to hide desperation. I hope you're eating. I hope you're okay. Then came the twist. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I just needed space. Space. That same word she'd weaponized when she wanted to see how far I'd follow. I scrolled to the end. Her last line said, "Can we meet? Just once." I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to discuss. Meeting her now would have meant stepping back into the same story, the same loop of promises and silence. I'd already left that loop behind. That afternoon, I drove into town, stopped by Walmart, picked up a few things for the house: new sheets, groceries, small things that made the space feel more permanent. It hit me as I loaded the bags into the car. I wasn't in hiding anymore. I was rebuilding. Later that evening, Mark called. He said she'd been asking about me. Said she looked different, not angry, just hollow. Apparently, she'd stopped posting on social media and started staying home. He said, "I think she finally gets it." I told him no. She's just realizing silence doesn't negotiate. That night, I sat outside again, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, the sound of crickets filling the dark. I thought about how quiet endings really are. There's no dramatic music, no big realization. Just slow, steady detachment. One breath at a time. She told me once that I shut down too easily. Maybe she was right. But shutting down isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes it's how you protect the parts of yourself that someone else kept trying to break. When I went to bed that night, I finally slept without dreams. Because peace doesn't come when things make sense. It comes when you stop needing them to. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice came through, quiet but steady. She said she was outside. For a moment, I didn't move. I could have hung up, but something in me wanted to see what silence had done to her. I told her, "Give me 10 minutes. When I stepped outside, she was standing by her car, arms folded, like she was trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were different, tired, searching, not angry this time. She said, "You really weren't going to call me back?" I told her, "You asked for space. I gave it to you." She didn't argue, just nodded, then looked around like she didn't recognize the world I lived in now. The porch, the quiet, the distance, it all made her uncomfortable. She said she'd been thinking that maybe she'd made a mistake, that the break was supposed to make things better, not end them. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk herself in circles until she ran out of excuses. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Did you miss me?" I looked at her and said, "No, I missed who I thought you were." Her face fell, not from insult, but realization. She understood now that she'd lost something deeper than affection. She'd lost her place in my peace. She tried to smile, but it didn't hold. "I still love you," she whispered. I didn't answer. Love, the way she meant it, was a currency I no longer traded in. It was built on guilt, control, and timing, not truth. After a long silence, she said, "So this is it?" I nodded. This was it a long time ago. She didn't cry. She just stood there, still, quiet, the way people do when they finally realize they're no longer the center of the story. She left without saying goodbye. The sound of her car fading into the distance didn't hurt. It just confirmed what I already knew. The version of her that once made my world feel full was gone long before I walked away. That night, I sat back on the porch, the same place she'd stood hours earlier, and looked out at the empty road. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. I wasn't even thinking about her. I was thinking about how freedom doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it just comes with the courage to stop reacting at all. A week passed after she showed up. No calls, no messages, just silence again, but this time it wasn't mine. It was hers. I knew what was happening. She was starting to feel the same emptiness she once left me with. It always happens that way. The silence that used to give her power had turned on her. Now it was her reflection. I went back to my routines. Mornings were simple. Coffee on the porch, the quiet hum of the world waking up. I'd drive into town, pick up what I needed from Walmart, talk to no one, and leave. My life had become minimal, stripped of noise and expectation. That simplicity was addictive. I started realizing that peace isn't built on what you gain. It's built on what you finally stop chasing. One afternoon, Mark called. He said she'd been asking about me again, but this time not with anger. He said she looked lost, almost embarrassed. She told me she keeps going through old photos, he said, like she's trying to remember who you were. I didn't say anything for a while, then said, she's not remembering me. She's trying to find proof that I still exist for her. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my old laptop, the one still synced to the cloud. She hadn't logged out of our shared folder. Hundreds of photos, vacations, dinners, birthdays. I scrolled through them in silence. Her smile was everywhere, bright and convincing. My eyes looked tired in every picture. I didn't hate those memories, but I didn't recognize the man in them anymore. He was patient, forgiving, waiting for someone who only showed up when it suited her. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I realized something in that moment. She was still living in the past, but I wasn't. She was searching for closure in old photos, while I was building peace in new silence. The next morning, I deleted the entire folder. Not out of spite, but out of freedom. Some memories aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to remind you why you'll never go back. As the files disappeared one by one, I smiled. She'd spend months looking for the man in those photos. But the truth was simple. He was gone. And he wasn't coming back. A few more weeks passed before I heard from her again. It was a message, short and heavy. I saw you deleted everything. No greeting, no question. Just accusation wrapped in heartbreak. I stared at the words for a long time, not because they hurt, but because they proved she was still trying to control a version of me that didn't exist anymore. She wanted to provoke a reaction, to feel relevant again. I didn't respond. That silence wasn't revenge, it was preservation. I went about my day like nothing happened. Drove to the coast, grabbed a coffee from Starbucks, and sat outside watching the tide roll in. There was something peaceful about the waves. They moved endlessly, crashing and reforming, never staying the same, but never asking permission to change either. That's how I felt now. Still in motion, but no longer waiting for her to catch up. That night, Mark called again. He said she'd been posting old pictures online. Us at the lake, our wedding, our first trip together. Captions like "Some things never fade" and "Once in a lifetime." He said people were commenting, asking if we were back together. I laughed quietly, not at her pain, but at the irony. She used to hate attention. Now it was all she had left. I told him not to mention me, not to engage. He said, "She looks like she's falling apart, man." I said, "Sometimes that's what truth feels like." Then I hung up. Later that evening, I went through my own phone. No messages, no missed calls, no chaos. Just calm. I started to notice things I'd forgotten to appreciate. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of cars in the distance, the feeling of peace that comes when your life is finally yours again. Before going to bed, I checked her message one more time. "I saw you deleted everything." It stayed unread, like a relic of a life I no longer belonged to. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to justify, explain, or soften the truth. She'd spent so long using distance as a weapon that she never realized how it would feel when I turned it into armor. I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and let the dark settle in. She was out there somewhere, trying to piece me together from old photos and memories. But all she'd ever find were fragments of a man who'd finally stopped waiting to be understood. I didn't hear from her for nearly a month after that. The silence stretched long and clean. I filled it with small things, routine, work, the quiet discipline of rebuilding a life from the inside out. Most nights, I'd cook dinner, pour a drink, and watch the sunset fade through the living room window. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was peace, and peace felt better than happiness ever did. Then one Friday evening, I got a message from Mark. He said she'd been seen at Olive Garden, sitting alone. He said she looked like she'd been crying, just staring at her phone. I didn't ask why he was telling me. I already knew. Guilt has a way of echoing loud enough for everyone around it to hear. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't answer, but I read the text. "I don't know how you do it. How you stay so calm. How you just walk away like none of it mattered." I sat there, staring at her words, realizing how much projection they carried. It wasn't that I didn't care, it's that I finally cared about myself more. I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a drive. The air was cool, the streets empty. I ended up at that same diner off the highway, the one where I used to sit after long arguments, wondering if love was supposed to hurt this much. The same waitress was there. She smiled and said, "Haven't seen you in a while." I told her, yeah, I guess I stopped coming here for the wrong reasons. After dinner, I drove back home and sat in the driveway for a long time. The porch light glowed against the quiet night. Inside, the house looked different now, not because I'd changed it, but because it no longer carried her shadow. Every object, every silence, belonged to me again. Before going inside, I opened her message one more time. How do you just walk away like none of it mattered? I typed a response, stared at it, then deleted it. She didn't need an answer. She needed the absence of one. Because the truth was simple. She'd spent months teaching me how to survive without her, and I'd finally learned the lesson better than she ever intended. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no thoughts of her. Just the kind of silence that feels like victory. It was early spring when I saw her again. I'd stopped thinking about her by then, not out of effort, but because life had finally moved on without her name attached to every thought. I was leaving a Home Depot one Saturday morning, a few bags of supplies in my hand, when I saw her across the parking lot. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of pretending had finally settled on her shoulders. For a second, she hesitated, then walked toward me. Her voice was soft when she spoke. She said, "You really disappeared." I nodded. That was the point. She smiled, but it wasn't confident. It was tired. She said she'd been trying to understand how I could just switch off. That she'd been looking through our old photos, trying to find where it all went wrong. I told her quietly, it didn't go wrong. It just stopped surviving where there was no respect left. She stood there, holding her phone like it was proof of something. "I thought you'd come back," she said. "You always did." I looked at her and said, "That was before I learned that silence can be an answer." The words hung between us like a verdict neither of us could argue with. There was a moment when I could tell she wanted to reach out, to say something that would undo everything. But time doesn't work that way. When trust dies, it doesn't get resurrected by regret. It just stays buried, quietly shaping who you become after. She whispered, "I miss who we were." I told her, "So do I. But we don't exist there anymore." Her eyes watered, and for a second, she almost looked like the woman I once loved. But the difference was clear now. She was looking backward. I was facing forward. When she turned to leave, she said, "You really meant it, didn't you? You're not coming back." I said, "No, I already came back, to myself." Then I walked past her, got into my car, and drove away without looking back. The rearview mirror caught a glimpse of her standing there, still holding that phone, still searching for closure in the ghosts of what we used to be. But the story was over long before she realized it. As I drove home, the silence inside the car felt lighter than ever. Some endings don't need revenge, or anger, or noise. They just need someone strong enough to stop reacting, and finally let the quiet speak for them. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.